Funding for New Mexico in Focus is provided by viewers like you.
This week on New Mexico in Focus, planting the seed. We head to the Hermit's Peak Calf Canyon burn scar, where two researchers are speeding up the clock to regain what was lost.
It takes a long time to grow a mature forest. That is not an option for us. We need to try to restore the forest as it was.
And amid federal funding chaos, the state forester tells us how officials have prepared to respond to this year's fire season and its aftermath. New Mexico in Focus starts now. Thanks for joining us. I'm Nash Jones. New Mexico's wildfire season is in full swing. We've seen a few crop up so far, with hundreds of acres burned by the Camp Fire in southeastern New Mexico and the Paradise Fire in the southwest. The National Interagency Fire Center predicts the season is likely to ramp up later this month as the landscape continues to dry out, temperatures rise, and lightning strikes increase as the monsoons move in. And while yes, many of you have gotten some much needed rain this week, most of the state is still experiencing severe to exceptional drought, which is likely to persist. Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham has declared a state of emergency, directing a drought task force to coordinate the state's response and reduce fire risk. We're going to bring you more on the wildfire forecast and how changes at the federal level could affect New Mexico's response. As Source New Mexico's Patrick Lohman sits down with the state forester, Laura McCarthy. As this subject demands, we're also going to take you out of the studio and into the forest this week. Correspondent Elizabeth Miller speaks with researchers working to regrow the canopy in the Hermit's Peak Calf Canyon burn scar. The Forest Stewards Guild is also on the ground in northern New Mexico, helping Santa Fe area residents assess their risk, prepare for fires, and hopefully keep them small. They're also lighting fires, and I sit down with two of the Guild's staff to learn about their use of prescribed fire and their trust-building efforts following the devastating, out-of-control prescribed burns that have wreaked havoc on our state in recent years. But first, despite being 3 years out from the largest wildfire in New Mexico history, survivors of the Hermit's Peak Calf Canyon fire in San Miguel and Mora counties have still not been made whole. And the city of Las Vegas remains without safe drinking water. That's despite billions in federal funding and millions in state funding approved for their recovery. Residents shared their struggles with the governor and several members of her cabinet last week at a 4-hour town hall at New Mexico Highlands University.
Culverts aren't being cleaned like they need to be cleaned. The rivers are still running with a lot of debris on it. Landslides are coming down the mountainside, affecting the only way in and way out for these people within our community.
I'm just one little tiny example of somebody who's older, who lives alone, who's low income and dealing with health issues.
There are no landlines, and often we have no power. The only way I have a phone, and many of my neighbors have a phone, is if we have power and have internet.
Those were the voices of Laura Silva, Sin Palmer, and Z. Pinsley. The governor told those gathered that she was there because it's taking too long to get all of that money where it's supposed to go.
After 3 years, frankly, we should be a lot further along. Something's not happening here that should. We're going to show you, all right? We're going to do it with some slides. There's a lot of money available in Las Vegas, in San Miguel County, and in Mora and Mora County. But when I drive through here, I don't see it.
The panel compared spending in the northern communities to that of others that weathered disasters much more recently. According to state data, the city of Las Vegas has spent just 2.5%, less than $4 million of the nearly $145 million in federal and state funds available to it. Mora County has spent less than 1% of the close to $60 million it's been allotted. In contrast, the city of Ruidoso, which is recovering from last summer's South Fork and salt fires, has spent more money than those two communities combined in less than a year, at 23% of its total funds. Lujan Grisham brought home what Ruidoso spending means for that village.
They're building houses. They've redone their water system. They opened their racetrack. New businesses are coming to Ruidoso and Ruidoso Downs.
The governor told the crowd that FEMA can be challenging to work with, and the state isn't perfect either. But she pointed the finger at the city and county governments, saying they're what's different between the communities that are spending the funds on permanent fixes and those that aren't.
There's money available and it's not being spent on the things you need it spent on. And I don't have it. I don't get to spend it on your behalf. Only the local governments can, unless we shift that.
Las Vegas Mayor David Romero pushed back, sharing an agreement between the city and FEMA for ongoing recovery work that he says is still in the planning phase, with about 2.5 years left before construction could even begin. The governor called that timeline unacceptable and questioned Romero about why the city was working with the feds instead of the state.
How are you feeling about FEMA right now?
Not good.
Not good. So why would you have an agreement with FEMA? Have an agreement like you were going to last year with us. Let the state deal with this issue. We will move it further and faster, as evidenced by the other communities that are supporting.
Luan Grisham said that while she'd prefer the cooperative approach, she does have the authority to take over at least the city's water quality issue without its consent. Spokesperson for the city of Las Vegas, Amanda Salas, told us that the city has been in touch with the governor's office about her offer and how the state can support its water treatment plant. She said the city, quote, welcomes any additional resources and joint planning efforts. Recovery for people who live in and around the Hermit's Peak Calf Canyon burn scar is clearly still very much a work in progress. But that's also where things stand for scientists working to help the forest recover. Fire burned more than 340,000 acres of spruce, fir, and ponderosa pine. And the U.S. Forest Service has already started replanting seedlings into several of the burned areas to help bring the forest back. This week, New Mexico in Focus correspondent Elizabeth Miller takes us to one of those replanting sites outside of Las Vegas at Johnson Mesa. She caught up with researchers Andre Toca from New Mexico State University and the University of New Mexico's Christopher Marsh to talk about how those seedlings are doing, what challenges they face, and how their research aims to help more trees survive and seed the forest of the future.
This is the edge of the Hermit's Peak Calf Canyon wildfire. As big as this burned area looks, it's a small part of the entire acreage that went up in flames 3 years ago. Getting it to look like a forest again is going to require human intervention, which is why so much research is being done in New Mexico about how to make the most of a very limited supply of seeds and seedlings and people to replant trees.
There are two options, right? Once we leave the forest, regenerate on its own. The second one would be reforestation. Problem with leaving the forest regrow, the ecological succession would take over, and we would get this forest that we all appreciate within the next 300 to 400 years. So it takes a long time to grow a mature forest that provides the services that we all enjoy, things like clean water, hiking areas, timber, firewood, hunting, fishing, any of those things that we enjoy. So that is not an option for us. We need to plant seedlings and try to restore the forest as it was, or similarly.
If we're reforesting a landscape like this, first of all, we need seed. And that seed is hard to get. That normally involves teams of people who go and scout ponderosa pine trees within the same kind of area, finding them when the cones are still green, picking those cones by climbing trees, drying those cones, extracting that seed, and then those seeds go to a place like the John T. Harrington Forest Research Center in Mora, are grown into seedlings which are typically 1 season old, then given to a planting crew who go out and plant large landscapes like this.
For reforestation, after such a large-scale fire, we cannot be reactive. We need to prepare ahead of time and collect those seeds and have them ready for whenever fire might happen. So once we have those seed sources from the locally adapted trees, then we can grow those seedlings in the nurseries. And that's where the second step comes, which is growing the highest quality of seedlings that we can.
There's bottlenecks at each of those connections, and seed source which are climatically suitable for environments like this are quite hard to come by. But also, without the shade of the surviving trees, it's a much hotter and drier environment in big burn scars like this than it would be if there were surviving trees. So those seedlings need to be particularly hardy and be able to cope with a lot of different climate extremes. If that's from real cold snaps like we see here at high elevations, or very dry periods like we see in areas like the Los Conchas burn area.
The JTH Forestry Research Center is quite unique because we have a tight relationship between the research that we do and the production line. So we can apply what we learn immediately. My job there is to study stress resistance mechanisms in seedlings, and more importantly, how to implement that in the nursery so that seedlings come to the field prepared to deal with those high temperature, drought, and cold. So we're talking about root development, for example. We're trying to promote early and fast root growth, which will increase their chance of survival. We are also trying to grow seedlings that have a higher percentage of root mass. So when they're exposed to sunlight, they do not demand so much water. They don't get dry, basically, because of so much leaf area. There are many other physiological mechanisms that seedlings develop, and what we try is to have them develop those mechanisms early on in the nursery, so they do not have to do that in the field.
What kind of seedling survival rate do we see when we try to replant after some of these big wildfires?
Half of our problem that we have in the Southwest with our reforestation effort is those seedling survival rates are really variable and site dependent. A 2015 study which looked at multiple planting sites after a high severity burns had an average seedling survival of 25%. In some of those areas they saw survival of 70%, some they saw none, and that average is like a real mix. So figuring out what elements within those sites govern that seedling survival can help us learn and apply the lessons that we learned from those different sites to different areas, and hopefully increase the seedling survival rates in all reforestation areas.
And this is microclimate. So
this is microclimates.
What is microclimate?
So microclimates are places on the landscape which are either hotter or cooler than the prevailing climate. And that may be based on topography, north or south-facing slopes which receive more solar radiation or sunlight typically over the period of a year, or areas which funnel water down little valleys and they're wetter and cooler than other areas. So being able to identify those microclimates, those little microsites, can be really beneficial for reforestation efforts, so we can plant on those north-facing slopes and in those little gullies which are wetter and cooler. So when we plant seedlings, we typically put them in a Vexar tube, which is this plastic bit of netting, which is biodegradable, and it's just to protect it from browse, being eaten by deer or elk, just to give it a chance before it forms some woody mass and is protected from that. So this is our little seedling. He's only about 6 months old, and he would have come pretty much straight from the greenhouse around this kind of size, so he hasn't had much time to grow yet. But what we did develop to measure the variables which might predict the survival or growth of this seedling is these microclimate data loggers that we made at UNM, which measure soil moisture, air temperature, and humidity and light levels at the same sort of scale that our seedlings planted at. So using lots of microclimate data loggers and drone imagery, we can model those microclimates over a site and then identify before planting where we're going to see probably the most seedling survival and highest growth. Equally distributing our reforestation resources over that entire burn area is not likely to lead to good results. We're probably better off targeting those areas of high seedling probability and planting in those. Here in this Gamba oak patch, there's a lot of leaf matter which retains a lot of soil moisture, and we can see if we dig this up, there's a lot of moisture in the soil in patches like this. So this creates its own microclimate, its own little microsite, which is more favorable to the planted seedlings, retaining that moisture, buffering against solar radiation, and allowing them to grow a lot faster and survive a lot better. As we can see from this seedling, who looks pretty happy here in this little Gamba oak patch. In 10 to 12 years, those seedlings that we plant will produce their own seed, and then we can fill in the gaps between those patches of high seedling survival probability, as opposed to trying to blanket the area in seedlings and spending a lot of money and a lot of time chasing the same kind of tree density that was there previously and trying to replace that within one generation. One of the main driving factors that we see in high severity burns like this one is really high density of trees. So typically if we were to look at the Gila wilderness down south, which is a naturally fire maintained ponderosa pine system, the trees are much sparser in their density, and there's areas without any trees within them. So when a fire does start, it generally burns at low severity. But when we have high densities of trees like this, and a fire like the Hermit's Peak Calf Canyon burns, it will burn at high severity, travel very quickly, and be crown fire, which is jumping from each tree canopy to the next. All of the trees which would produce seed for the forest to naturally regenerate are now dead.
The forest that comes back is probably not going to look like that carpet of trees that we knew before the fires. What might it look like instead?
Well, hopefully what it will look like is a mosaic forest. We will have a mature forest, maybe in about 100 years or so. But also we want basically a heterogeneous forest. Patches where that have recently burned at a small scale, low intensity. Those will support certain wildlife, certain services for the communities down the slope, down the drainage, and areas where we will have seed sources so that forest expands into places where we cannot access or perhaps were not planted for any reason. So ideally, we want the forest dynamic to come back to a natural regime where parts burn, but at a lower intensity, and that creates a very heterogeneous forest.
It's the little steps we take over time to get to a healthy relationship with fire, where it's not this extreme source of fear that I see in my everyday work of people are vulnerable to wildfire and they know it. So we're trying to get back to those fires that we can live with.
That conversation with Eitan Krasılevski and Maya Hilty of the Forest Stewards Guild is coming up in less than 20 minutes. Thanks also to NMPBS photojournalists Joey Dunn and Manny Valdez for their work up on Johnson Mesa. Since New Mexico's fire season began this spring, about 25 local jurisdictions have imposed some level of fire restriction. Now, with the ongoing drought and record low snowpack, wildfire forecasters are waving a red flag. Source New Mexico reporter Patrick Lohman has dug deeply into the state's response into wildfires in recent years. This week, he sat down in our studio for a conversation with State Forester Laura McCarthy about how New Mexico is trying to beef up its ability to respond to wildfires. Plus, she tells Lohman how she's thinking about this year's wildfire season amid chaos and cuts at the federal level. Here's that conversation.
Welcome, Laura, and thanks for making the time. I thought I'd start with the recent wildfire that was in the news. The Fort Stanton historical site north of Ruidoso is still largely intact after a fast-moving wildfire called the Camp Fire. Did the state's wildfire crews respond to that fire, and can you just tell me generally how that went?
Yes, that fire was a good early season wildfire and test of our ability to work together, state and federal, on a fast-moving, mostly grass and woodland fire. The initial attack effort was primarily led by local first responders and engine crews from our Capitan district, and they did a good job up front. That fire originated on Bureau of Land Management controlled land, and therefore that fire was managed by the BLM on behalf of the interagency fire responders. For us from New Mexico Forestry Division, we did have one of our wildland fire crews that was created after the Hermit's Peak fire responding to that fire. The Camp Fire, that is. That was our Mimbres crew that is based out of Socorro.
Oh, right. Okay. And how are things going when it comes to the state's effort to build these teams that eventually will try to become hotshots, right?
We've made incredible progress in 3 years. And the first thing we had to do was create a wildland firefighter job series with the state personnel office. And they did that for us, and they based it on the National Wildfire Coordinating Group standards, which really improved our competitiveness and ability to hire qualified people for the state-run crew. Because now we have competitive salary, we have a career ladder for firefighters, and through legislation that was passed in 2024, our firefighters are now part of the Public Safety Retirement Plan, which was a barrier for us relative to the feds that were offering an enhanced retirement plan. So now we do that as well. And then finally, we were able to work with the Department of Information Technology to figure out how to offer hazard pay for the actual time that firefighters are on the fire line. So now that we've done all three things, the job series with the career ladder, the enhanced retirement, and the hazard pay, we are extremely competitive. And with all the challenges that the federal government is having right now, we are finding that our applicant pools have gotten a lot better. Now, I will say that firefighting is hard and dangerous work, and it requires being away from your family and home for extended periods of time. And as a result of those factors, which are unchanged, we do have a lot of turnover, and we are still working toward being fully staffed on both of our crews.
Okay, got it. And since that fire is now out of the way, I'm just kind of curious how you're viewing the rest of the fire season in New Mexico. By my count, about 25 local jurisdictions, including counties, tribal land, forest ranger districts, have imposed some level of fire restriction, and the governor last week declared a state of emergency due to drought. What's in store for us for the next couple months, would you say?
So the predictions are that we stay in drought. And that said, we are having some moisture come in from both the Pacific and Caribbean. And so I think there is a little bit of uncertainty right now as to whether the moisture that we are going to get for the rest of this week, then a drying trend, then moisture maybe the following week, that could change things in some parts of the state. I really don't think that the southwest part of New Mexico will get out of drought conditions even with this moisture. And that's because their winter deficit was so high, so little snowpack to recharge the mountain soils and mountain streams in the southwest part of New Mexico, that we are anticipating that our elevated fire danger will continue there. The rest of the state, especially the eastern part and northern New Mexico, have been getting fair amounts of moisture, including some late season snows before fire season started, and we are seeing green up. Where we have green up, then we will be in a situation of reduced fire danger until that new green grass and vegetation dries out. Whether that happens depends on the monsoon season. And there have been some years since I've been state forester where we've had some increased moisture in May and June, more than we were expecting. But then the monsoon really failed to materialize or lasted like 2 weeks and then was over. In that kind of a scenario, then we get drying in August and September and a second wave of fire season.
And sir, speaking of Southwest New Mexico, we reported this week that Elon Musk's Doge is no longer seeking to cancel the dispatch center, the leases where the dispatch centers are held, including in Silver City and Albuquerque. I just wonder, do you happen to know what it might have taken to keep those centers open, and also what that means, broadly for the state and the federal and all these efforts to keep wildfires small in southwestern New Mexico and elsewhere, that those centers are staying open?
I don't have details on the dispatch centers in particular. However, I do think that on a range of administration-led proposed changes to wildland firefighting, there's been a lot of discussion and information provided by state and local fire responders. And the drumbeat has been pretty steady. And as our organization and our partner organizations in other states that are state forestry and that represent local fire departments, we have some pretty consistent messaging that is fact-based, and we are seeing that members of Congress and members of the administration are hearing our concerns, because at the end of the day, if wildfire is not managed well, people's lives are on the line. And the administration doesn't want responsibility for making a bunch of mistakes in that arena. So they're listening.
Right. And in fact, recently you've said that you believe, just based on the state volunteer resources that are available, the state teams, and what still remains at the federal level, that resource levels will be adequate at least this season. Do you see any way that federal cuts and chaos that's happening could affect the wildfire response in New Mexico this year at this point?
I think we're going to be okay for this year.
Yeah.
You know, if you look at the trajectory, so January, February, and March, their messaging was, we are going to one fire service and we're going to do that right away. And by the end of April, early May, they had backed off that. And the messaging was, well, if we're going to go to one fire service, we'll do that in 26. Now, the president's budget has come out, both the skinny budget and then last Friday or Thursday, the full budget. And it is really clear that they are wanting to go to one federal fire service. I think that we don't know exactly what that means or what that will look like. And one of our challenges being in the Southwest is that we hit our fire season earlier than the rest of the country. And so with our fire season starting sometimes the last week of March, we really need some certainty come January as to what we will be looking at relative to changes and how those changes might affect the cooperative agreements that we all operate under.
Are you still trying to decide what you think about a single federal wildland firefighting force? Or do you have anything you'd want to share about, you think, what that would look like or mean for us in New Mexico?
That's a rabbit hole,
Yeah.
right? Because it's unknown as to what exactly is going to be proposed. What I do think is that we're in good shape in New Mexico with our legislature and governor's office really understanding the need for the state of New Mexico to have some independence when it comes to wildfire response.
I remember you said in October in a speech at UNM that you kind of described the federal response to wildfire recovery as fragmented and constrained. I'm just wondering if you're seeing anything out of Washington these days that you think would help fix that problem or make it worse?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, no, I'm not seeing anything out of Washington that would make it better yet. I think that the backlash against FEMA and disaster response in general is a reflection of the problems that I was talking about in that UNM speech, which was on post-fire recovery. under the Biden administration, there was a concerted effort to improve the interagency coordination for post-wildfire response, and that is on hold right now. So between the uncertainty about what will happen to FEMA in the future and the lack of continued dialogue on post-fire response, I don't think that we can expect anything to change in the near future.
Okay, my last question. Thank you again for your time. I happen to know that you were in Washington, D.C. a few weeks back and were lobbying for something or against something along with the state forester in Utah. You politely declined back then to tell me exactly what it was you were doing, but I'm wondering if now you might be willing to say what compels you to brave the halls of Congress now.
A few months ago, 18 state foresters went to DC together under the umbrella of the National Association of State Foresters. And we had a few key messages to deliver to members of Congress and the administration. One of them was around our concern that through the DOGE effort, one wildland fire service would be created for the 2025 fire season. And we wanted to make clear that that was not going to work, and that states are responsible for 80% of the wildfire response nationally. Now, that balance might be a little different in New Mexico, where I would say it's more 50-50, but nationally, 80% of firefighting is done by states and local governments, and therefore the federal government doesn't get to just change the game on the rest of us in the middle of a fire season. That message was heard, and I really believe that our showing up in a group of 18 state foresters did make a difference in terms of the understanding of the consequences of moving too quickly where wildland fire is concerned.
Thank you to State Forester Laura McCarthy and Source New Mexico's Patrick Lohman for bringing us that update. Federal, state, and local governments aren't the only players in preventing and responding to New Mexico wildfires. Next, I sit down with staff from Santa Fe-based nonprofit, the Forest Stewards Guild, to learn about how they plug into the work, from risk assessment to mitigation and education. I asked them about their prescribed burn team and how their approach has changed in the face of community trauma from runaway government-caused fires. Eitan Krasielewski, Maya Hilty, thanks so much for joining me. So the Forest Stewards Guild, Eitan, what does your organization mean by stewardship of the forest?
Yeah, so stewardship is an important concept. It can mean professional stewardship, people who go to college or invest their career in being a forest steward and may have degrees or certifications. It can also mean someone who has a woodlot in their backyard and manages the forest for birds or for pollinators. So we keep a really broad interpretation of stewardship.
Okay, and we'll probably get into some of the different programmatic areas. One that I want to talk to, Maya, you coordinate the Community Wildfire Defense Grant. Can you talk about what that is? What do you spend that grant money on?
Yeah, definitely. So for some context, the bipartisan infrastructure law enacted under the Biden administration set aside $1 billion for these community wildfire. $1 billion. These community wildfire defense grants are intended to help communities across the nation become more wildfire prepared. So we've gotten a lot of this money in New Mexico. Tens of millions of dollars have come into New Mexico from these grants, and the Guild is just one of those recipients.
How much did you receive?
Yeah, in early last year, we received $1.3 million, and we used that funding to do a lot of things. Really, a big one is education. So we can provide free home assessments in the greater Santa Fe area. People invite us out and we'll walk around their property with them and identify, these are the top priority things you could do to reduce the risk of your home igniting during a wildfire. So those have been in really high demand. The one-on-one interaction is really great for motivating people to take action. And just anecdotally, I know that many, if not most, people do take some action to reduce their risk after a home assessment.
And those kinds of things might be reducing the fuels around their home. What do you end up finding in these assessments?
Yeah, so a lot of it is the small things. Attention to detail is really important for mitigating wildfire risk. It might be just cleaning your roof of debris, especially in the spring before the worst of the fire season, and removing vegetation in that 5-foot buffer around your home, as well as some forest thinning depending on the property within 30 or 100 feet of the home to reduce the intensity of an approaching wildfire.
When you find these kinds of things, my understanding is the grant also goes towards cost sharing some of the mitigation that homeowner might take on?
Yeah, that's correct. So we're able to provide some financial assistance and financial incentive for people to act on our recommendations and do that forest thinning.
You know, this is a federal grant. You mentioned it came from the infrastructure law, the bipartisan infrastructure law under former President Biden. With the Trump administration having a priority to cut federal spending, as well as the administration's approach to kind of all things climate change, is the grant at risk at all?
You know, I'll pass that to Eitan. He might have a better answer and perspective on that.
Yeah, please.
Sure. Yeah. Wildfire mitigation and wildfire suppression funds have been fairly secure so far. And forest management is talked about by the administration as an asset to their policy goals and to their approach to fire management. Maya's program is part of that active forest management. The administration is calling for reducing fuels.
So it sounds like maybe there isn't a risk of this funding.
Well, that's my hopeful interpretation. I think it's uncertain. Just this week, we're hearing news about, the Forest Service budget, being radically changed from previous years, and also about sequestration of funds. And so it's unclear what's going to happen, but I'm hopeful that we're able to still continue this work.
What would the impact be if the funding was lost? Would you all be able to continue these efforts in another way? What would it mean for people on the ground who you're serving?
Yeah, so the Forest Stewards Guild is a nonprofit. We have other funding sources, but none of them are at the scale of 1.3 million. So it would be a pretty serious loss. And I think the first thing that would go would be the cost share program with landowners. That's something that we just don't have the funds without the Community Wildfire Defense Grant. And I will add that we offer we offer a sliding scale so that for people who show the need, we offer more cost share assistance. So we're trying to meet people where they're at, and want to make sure that wildfire defense is not something that you have to have money to do. So it's important to know. But yeah, it would be pretty catastrophic. We'd have to really go back to the drawing board and figure out what we can do.
Okay. I want to switch gears into talking about prescribed fire a little bit. It's kind of a dirty word to some New Mexicans, or at least a concerning one after the trauma experienced by, recently the Hermit's Peak Calf Canyon fire, where people lost their livelihoods, they lost their homes, they lost their land because of a federal prescribed burn or two that got out of control. So where does the Forest Guild stand on prescribed burning as a tool for stewarding the forest?
Yeah, so as an organization, we're rooted in science and traditional knowledge coming from different communities across the U.S. And, the science leads us towards using prescribed fire. The traditional knowledge, when you look at the literature, it's often place-based, also shows that, for long periods of time, people and fire coexisted on the landscape, and oftentimes, indigenous peoples, traditional communities used fire. So we have a lot of evidence to show, both from kind of Western science and from traditional knowledge, that prescribed fire is an important tool for people. Yeah.
Is it always a viable tool? Is it always an important tool that is available depending on kind of the status of the forest?
I think it depends on the ecosystem. We have ecosystems where it doesn't make sense, and we have ecosystems where it's vital. The southeastern United States burns more than the rest of the country combined. They have important pine forests, and prescribed fire is really important there, and they have a culture of burning. Our forests in New Mexico, we have a diversity of forests, and ponderosa pine, dry mixed conifer are the forest types in New Mexico where prescribed fire makes a lot of sense because those forests evolved with fire and are fire adapted.
Mm-hmm. And talking about kind of the history of prescribed fire, the Pueblo people do have knowledge, traditional knowledge and practices around this, as you were mentioning. Is that something that the Forest Guild utilizes, these traditional or cultural burning practices?
Well, we look to those sources of information to inform, what we choose to do. And, there's some great peer-reviewed scientific papers that look at traditional ecological knowledge around fire. One of them is from the Jemez Mountains, and it's pretty extensive and shows many different uses of fire and how the use of fire coexisted with fire on the landscape. And that's, I think, important. And, the Forest Stewards Guild, we also have youth crews. They're starting this week, and we have youth crews in partnership with Jemez Pueblo. And so, we're pretty tied to communities and community understanding of forests. And that's, just one example.
And you also have this All Hands, All Lands coalition. Can you talk about what that is?
Yeah, so the idea is that prescribed fire is hard, and by working together, we can make it easier, and we can help each other across jurisdictional boundaries. And so the All Hands, All Lands Burn Network, since 2018, has helped burn about 29,000 acres and across 9 different jurisdictions. Sometimes we're providing resources onto a federal burn to help with numbers or to help with qualifications. Sometimes we're leading a burn on private, state, or tribal lands. So there's a lot of flexibility to meet the different needs. And I'm really proud of the program. I think we've done good. Fire can be a real benefit to the ecosystem, the watershed, and to communities for community protection.
You mentioned you do it on private land. How is it always a state land, tribal land, or can it be a private homeowner as well?
Yeah, it can be private. We've burned piles in the winter on private lands in the Jemez Mountains up by Canjilon, and even last winter, 2 winters ago, right around Santa Fe, we burned on private lands right near the watershed piles, and we were right near homes. We had homeowners come to our morning briefings so that they could hear the safety briefing, the weather outlook, and see all the resources we had mobilized for those burns. And we took that pretty seriously, had a lot of pre-burn
concerns. Were people arriving concerned about what you were doing or how it could impact them?
Well, so there were concerns at the public meetings before the burns. The day of, the homeowners adjacent, they had been talking with us for several weeks, and they were on board, and we're happy that we were getting rid of the piles and that the forest was going to be in a more resilient condition. So I think it depends on who you talk to, but it felt pretty good the day of.
Maya, I want to ask you, with the recent trauma that so many people in northern New Mexico experienced around prescribed burns, what are you all hearing from community about the perception of that tool?
Yeah, so the Fireshed Coalition is very interested in understanding what people think, what they know, and what they might need to know more about. So we had this cool partnership with the Wildfire Research Center, a nonprofit that sent out surveys of city residents in 2021 and then because Hermit's Peak Calf Canyon happened, we sent out the same surveys in 2024 to see how maybe people's perceptions of prescribed fire had changed. And
so you got that kind of direct comparison, pre-Hermit's Peak Calf Canyon and post.
Yeah.
What was the change you recognized?
So as you can imagine, there was some decrease in support for, in particular, prescribed fire on public lands. But what we kind of actually interpret it as a green light to keep doing the work we're doing, because despite the decrease, the majority of people still support prescribed fire and want to see our forests become more resilient, understand that importance of that tool in order to get there. So 67% of people, even in 2024, were supportive of prescribed fire on public lands.
And is that in New Mexico, or what was your survey range?
It was just in the city of Santa Fe.
Okay. And for 67%, yes, it's the majority. It still means you have 30+% who aren't on board. To what degree is trust building a part of this work?
Yeah, super important, very important. I think that the role that we've played in the Fire Coalition, or that we're aiming to play, is helping the Forest Service, when the burns on public lands, be communicative and transparent about, where are prescribed burns planned and why are they planned? How are the prescriptions being made? What does it look like on the ground? Can we give photo point monitoring to people so they can see, oh, 2018, this is what the forest looked like. 2019, 2020, through the forest treatments. I think visuals are really powerful and impactful. So it's just trying to leverage all the different partners involved in this work and their networks to help people understand the work itself.
And the work itself has shifted some since Hermit's Peak Calf Canyon. The Forest Service changed their policies around how these would be done. What were some of those changes, Eitan?
Yeah, so some of the changes are that, a prescribed burn only gets authorized for a 24-hour period, and then every 24-hour period has to get reauthorized by the agency. The burn plan template itself has changed, and that's for all federal agencies and everyone that follows the National Wildfire Coordinating Group standards, NWCG. So now everyone that follows that standard is using a new template. That template looks at long-term drought conditions more deeply. It also has an updated pre-ignition checklist. We also call that a go, no-go checklist that has to be done every morning to make sure that you're all a go. If you're a no on anything, it's a no-go. So that's how that checklist is used. There's increased use of infrared technology to detect for heat after a fire. And so that can be through handheld units or on a drone or on an aircraft. Also, the contingency resources, the resources that you've talked to before you started your burn, to ask them, hey, if I need help, will you come and help? And if you do come, how many people and what resources will you bring? Those contingency resources, those now essentially need to be on site for a burn. So it increases because the standard now is 30 minutes, within 30 minutes of being a call. But as we know in New Mexico, you may have to drive quite a ways to go from even one town to the next. So it basically means resources need to be on site. So those are some of the changes. There's a few more. I think overall, for me, having seen, before Hermit's Peak Calf Canyon and after, I think it's a better process and a better system.
Is it a system that you all use as well? Do you employ it?
Yeah, so the Forest Stewards Guild, as a private organization, we choose to follow that national standard. When we're burning on certain jurisdictions, we have the option on private lands to not use the national standard. Oftentimes we still do. It's a pretty rigorous standard, but the need for prescribed fire out on the landscape and in the forest is really high, and the national standard is very rigorous. Like I was saying, it also costs a lot of money to fully implement. New Mexico has the New Mexico Prescribed Fire Act of 2021. It creates a New Mexico standard for prescribed fire. The Guild and myself were very involved in that process. And I want to see that process be successful so that more fire can happen out on the landscape. Burning on private lands is an important piece. And so we're looking to use that state standard in the future more.
You say it's rigorous. Is it rigorous enough? Is there more needed to make sure that these kinds of prescribed fires don't get out of control in New Mexico?
Yeah, I mean, this is a super complicated, and it's also fraught with passion, emotion, and like you started with, trauma, which is very real, and I acknowledge, and it is, but at the same time, the scientific part of my brain says, well, we know that on paper, prescribed burns are very safer than a lot of the other things we do every day. They're, only, 99.2% of prescribed burns go as planned. But the other part of my brain knows that for the few that don't go as planned, there can be very high consequences, and we know that in New Mexico, and we can't afford to make mistakes, and we have to be very careful.
I think, if you don't mind me jumping in too, I always think about it in the way that we can never guarantee that a prescribed fire won't escape, but the alternative that I think drives all of us to do this work is more catastrophic and larger wildfires. So I think essentially that's the question. If you're not using prescribed fire, you're at risk of these very severe wildfires plus post-fire debris flows. So that's kind of the problem that we're all wanting to tackle.
And your organization also does preparedness plans for local governments, is that right? In addition to these assessments you were talking about with homeowners?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they're called Community Wildfire Protection Plans, yet another acronym that starts with a C.
CW.
Yeah, and so Community Wildfire Protection Plans have been around for about 20 some odd years, and they've evolved over time and are getting better and better. They're an opportunity for volunteer fire departments, municipal departments, county, state. New Mexico Forestry Division is involved in all of this work too, and federal agencies to all come together and to look at maps, to identify resources and values on the landscape. Those can be homes, it can be communication towers, it could be recreation sites, it could be a ski area is obviously a value on the landscape we want to protect from catastrophic wildfire, and they develop plans that think about what are we going to do before a fire? What can we mitigate? Who do we need to hire? Do we need to have a wildland fire specialist for our county? They look at what do we do when a fire happens so that we can respond and be safe and effective. And then they also look at what should we be thinking about now so that if we get a fire, we're more prepared for that post-fire environment.
And these efforts, along with the idea around adapting a community to wildfire, to me it seems like almost a paradigm shift from preparedness, prevention, suppression to resilience. Like, how can these communities survive this and be prepared for a response when it happens? Is that the case? Are we shifting to wildfire being an inevitability in this climate changed world that we live in? I'd like each of you to maybe talk about that.
Yeah, I can start. So I think certainly it is a culture shift of what we want, what we dream about is a return to more fire on the land, not less. But we're talking about those low severity fires creeping through the pine needles of ponderosa forest that benefit the ecosystem rather than scorching everything. So, it's the little steps we take over time to get to a healthy relationship with fire where it's not this extreme source of fear that I see in my everyday work of people are vulnerable to wildfire and they know it. So we're trying to get back to those fires that we can live with.
Eitan?
Yeah, the community wildfire protection plans aren't going to like save us. They're important and we need them and they need to be good, but we need a bigger paradigm shift, like you were saying, Nash. And the, you know, one framework for that is something that the Guild has been involved in, along with, you know, others around the country for the last 10 plus years, this concept of fire adapted communities, communities that are resilient to wildfire, know they have risk and are actively taking steps both to live better with that risk and also learn, because there's no checklist, there's no like college class or something you could take to, you know, to say, okay, now I'm certified and I'm like ready and I'm fully resilient to fire. It's a process and it doesn't really have an end. So that's why it's a continuous adaptation to living on these landscapes. Yeah, the environment's getting hotter and drier, potentially more windy depending on where you are. Luckily, we had a lot of moisture recently in New Mexico and that helps. Yeah, so these fire-adapted communities as a concept are really important to get us thinking about the long term, that we're on this long, you know, this kind of unending trajectory of learning how to live on the landscape.
Eitan Kozlowski, Maya Helty, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks to the Forest Stewards Guild and everyone who contributed to this week's show. And before we go, a correction from last week. Albuquerque City Councilor Nicole Rogers said she'd like to see the city pay Civilian Police Oversight Agency, or CPOA, members. But the agency's administrators and investigators are paid city employees. It's the seats on its advisory board, or CPOA-B, that are unpaid positions. Thanks for joining us. For New Mexico PBS, I'm Nash Jones. Until next week, stay focused.
Funding for New Mexico in Focus is provided by viewers like you.